Welcome to Time with Theresa Around the World, bringing you up close and personal conversations with Christian leaders, authors, artists, filmmakers, talents, and celebrities from across the globe. Theresa and her guests are sure to warm your heart and encourage your soul. And now, your host, Theresa Westbrook.
Welcome to the program. Well, I've been looking forward to interviewing Mondo de la Vega for quite some time now. From the moment I first met him, I knew in my heart then that he had an amazing story the world needed to hear. Your faith is going to be built up as author, TV producer, and host. My guest and my friend, Mondo de la Vega, shares his amazing story of how God brought a gangster to grace and beyond. Welcome, Mondo.
Hello, my friend.
It's so great to have you here.
Listen, thank you for having me on with you. I've been looking forward to this. We have been wanting to do this for a long time, and we are finally here. But I wanted to thank you for considering me your friend. What an honor. Thank you.
Well, we love you, Mondo. God bless you and your family, all the Baker family. We love everyone over there at Morningside.
The crazy
Well,
bunch.
Mondo, I am so excited for all the Lord is doing for you. And I want to talk about your book today, My Crazy Life. And it's so full of miracles and special God moments that I want to encourage our audiences right now to get a copy, because we won't be able to share all the amazing things God did in your life in this short interview, but we're certainly going to get in as many as possible.
Thank you. This book here, My Crazy Life and the Moments That Brought a Gangster to Grace, is literally a culmination of great moments, sad moments, funny moments, but also desperate moments that brought me to where I am today. And I want to tell you something. This book is going to build your hope. It's going to build your faith. It's going to build your character. Is going to remind you that don't give up on your dreams, don't give up on God, and don't give up on yourself, because most of the time we want to give up so quickly. Yet God had a plan for your life. God had a plan for my life. This book details how from the beginning all the way to now, God's plans were on my life from the beginning all the way up to now. Yet I didn't realize it. Miss Theresa, I didn't realize that God loved me enough to, drive me crazy.
Well, yes, the book is so great, Mondo, and it's so vast, and it addresses so many different aspects of your life. But go ahead and take us to the beginning of your story and your childhood in Central America. What was that like?
Growing up in Central America, I had an amazing life. I was growing up around my family, growing up around my friends, school, and of course, sports was my life. I didn't think that anything was wrong at home. I didn't realize that anything, bad was happening, because everything that my mom and dad and my family were portraying were good times. And we did have a lot of great times. We did have a lot of fun times, but yet I didn't realize that my mom and my father were having problems until one evening changed everything. One moment in that evening changed the course of my future. My father was my hero. My father was everything to me. My father was someone that I wanted to be, someone that I looked up to. Yet in that moment, my father thought that my sister and I were asleep, and my father began to just lash out at my mother, began to cuss at her, began to kick her, began to punch her. And in her desperate moment, my mother had to run away from that room and lock herself in the bathroom. And then he tried to get into the bathroom. And on her desperate moment, she ran into the corridor of our home. And the first thing my father grabbed was her broom. Now, this broom, I title a chapter in my book, The Broomstick, because the broom that my mother had used to clean our home, to clean our rooms, to be part of her life, was now the very weapon of her demise. This very broom was the weapon that my father chose to use and began to beat her close to death. And as a 6-year-old watching my hero beat my mother, I stood there in fear. I could not move as a 6-year-old, watching the man that I wanted to grow up and be like now becomes a monster, becomes someone that I didn't recognize, not realizing that my father and my mother had been dealing with this type of issues years prior, my sister and I being born. And listen, that shocks you when you watch your hero, fall apart right before your eyes. And I believe that was the beginning. That was the birth of anger. That was the birth of anxiety. That was the birth of not understanding the emotions that I was feeling, because in that moment I felt angry and I felt like I wanted to kill my father. And the only thing I can communicate to my father as a 6-year-old was that when I grow up, I'm going to come back and I'm going to kill you for what you did to my mother. Not realizing that was the last time I will see my father, not realizing that will be the last time we will be a family together. My mother had to make a decision and said to myself, said to my sister, and she said to herself, if I stay here, he's going to kill me or I'm going to end up killing him, but I got to get these kids out of here. In that moment, my mother, she could have stayed there paralyzed in fear, yet she chose to believe that she needed to leave, and she left. You have to read the book on what happened, but in the middle of her crisis, this is how God works. In her middle of her crisis, God delivers a prophetic word to her in a church. My mother didn't want to go to church. My mother didn't want to understand anything about church, yet that's all she had left. And she said, you know what? Why not go to church? Because I don't have anything else to lose. I don't have anything else to gain from it. But if something happens, then I need to go there. My mother ended up going to this it was probably about a mega church, several thousand people. And she didn't understand what was happening, but yet a prophetic word was delivered to her that said, your son and your daughter have been called by God. God is going to protect you. God is going to take you onto the other side. He's going to take you to the promised land. For my mother, my sister, and I, the promised land was America. And yet, in order to get to America, we had to go through a process of waiting because my mother wanted to do the things the right way. We were hearing about family members and friends crossing the border illegally. Now, you have to understand, back in the 80s, there was a civil war that came to the Americas like never before, and over 1 million refugees fled to America in order to survive, in order to withstand the civil war that took place in Central America. Yet my mother chose to do it the right way because she didn't want my sister and I to live in hiding. She didn't want my sister and I to live in fear. And by the way, my mother was afraid that if she crossed the border illegally, my sister and I will be taken away from her and be human trafficked, or my mother will become a sex slave to the traffickers. And she said, I can't afford to do that. My mother was born in Los Angeles, California, yet the price she paid in order to do it the right way, it cost her a lot of money and it cost her a lot of time. Yet today, I understand why a lot of our people are crossing the border illegally. And I can tell you that there's a lot of beautiful families that are looking for an escape from their crisis. Yet in the middle of that, there's, evil people that are infiltrating the nation. And it's scary because the people that are coming across, are mixed in with good people. The hard part is who's good and who's bad. It's very difficult to tell them apart because you don't see them in action. Yet my mother chose to stay behind and do it the right way for her and her 2 kids, but yet she still had a price to pay. We made it to America. Thank God my sister and I became U.S. citizens. And by the time we landed in America, the gang had exploded all over America. And America wasn't ready for the explosion of gang memberships that exploded in the 1990s, in the late 80s. America was used to listening and hearing about the mobsters and the gang members and the gangsters that came out of the Chicago community, the gangsters that came out of New York, people like John Gotti, and people were hearing the type of mobsters, but they were not ready for the new gang members that were exploding into the scenes that happened to be Latinos. And they exploded into the scenes in Los Angeles, California, and it overwhelmed America because today we have over a million gang members that came out of the explosion that happened in the early 90s.
Mm, wow. Well, I'm going to back up just a little bit to your mother. What an amazing woman she is. And I call them sheroes. And there's been some powerful women in your life, and I want to highlight them as well in this interview as well. But my goodness, Mondo, she was amazing. And I really appreciate what you had to say about why it was important to get over here legally, and then what we're facing today in today's current world affairs, and how the same issues and things she was afraid of is going on right now in our world as
Yeah.
well. So you are here in America, starting a new life. But when you got to America, the land of promise, it didn't impact your childhood as you thought.
No,
You didn't begin to find the hope that you were looking for because of the childhood trauma that put you on a path to destruction.
that's
And
correct.
so you eventually became a gang member.
Yeah.
So go ahead and share more about that.
America didn't, the promised land didn't look like what we were expecting because we came from a world that we were together all the time. We were a family all the time. We ate as a family, we hung out as a family. By the time we came to America, we had already moved about 12 different times. And my uncles and my aunts were giving us a place to stay while we were here in America. But that ran out real quick. That help ran out real quick because they needed to get back to their normal life. My mother had gotten, I think, about 4 jobs a week in order to provide a home for my sister and I. My mother was so excited because she had found a place for my sister and I to live. Yet by the time we got there, I was so disappointed that I looked at her and says, "What is this? What is this a home?" I wasn't used to living inside of a little box where there was no bedrooms. There was a bathroom, there was a very small kitchen, and the living area was almost like a studio apartment. And I began to question her, and I realized that I had broken my mother's heart because here she was doing everything she could in her power in order to provide for my sister and I, and yet I was so disappointed. Yet my mother was working 3 to 4 jobs a week in order to provide. That meant that she was sacrificing her time with her kids. And guess who was waiting for me to get my attention? It was the gang members downstairs in the apartment building. They controlled. Now you have to understand, in the inner city and the different sections, when families are having to live in apartment buildings, most of the time gang members, they rule that area. They protect that area. They protect the building and the tenants in that area, but it comes with a price of extortion, a price that in order to protect the environment, they had to pay taxes to these gang members in order to continue to live life, because otherwise other gang members will come in and try to take over that neighborhood. This was a new culture for me. This was a new environment for me. I didn't understand what was happening. I didn't even understand the language. I didn't understand the culture. All I knew is that what I was seeing was young people and older people earning the respect of the community. And one of the scenes that I write about in my book is a young man is getting disciplined with a baseball bat. The last time I saw somebody get beaten was my mother with a broomstick. Along the way, I started watching things that a young boy should never watch because the Civil War exposes scenes that a young man doesn't understand, from people being beaten, people being raped, people people's homes catching on fire. And I'm watching this as we were escaping my father's wrath. Now I'm in America and I'm watching a young man get beaten because he's being disciplined by the old gang members. And as I'm watching this, instead of being fearful, an adrenaline inside of me arose. And I said to myself, I want to be like them. By this time, I'm 8, 9, 10 years old, and I'm being exposed to a lifestyle that is earning the respect, that's earning the community's respect. And I'm watching the lowriders, and I'm watching my mother, my poor mother couldn't compete against their attention, against what they were providing. By the time I'm 11 years old, I'm being jumped into this gang. Jump means you're getting beaten in order to be a part of this gang. The initiation process begins to take place. There's a chapter in the book that I titled it The Baptism of the Soul, because when they jump you in, by the time you arrive and you're getting an introduction, you're showing up as a young boy, innocent young boy with anger, filled with anxiety, filled with fear. Yet by the time I get jumped in with 4 other gang members using every ounce of force, by the time I'm being picked up from the ground and I'm bruised and I'm bleeding, and I'm hearing a different lingo, a different talk, and they're cheering, I rise up as a fierce wolf waiting to get vengeance. They knew how to pay attention to the anger, to the emotion that I was portraying, the emotion of getting even. They knew that if they can get a hold of it, they can thrive on that. Yet I was just a little boy filled with fear, not understanding what I was doing. Now I'm in this environment filled with survival mode, and now I became one of them, and becoming a gang member meant that I was willing to live and die for them. Now it meant I was willing to recruit for them. Now it meant I was willing to deal drugs for them. And they began to use people like myself in order to advance their agenda. Today, there's over 1 million gang members in America. Every street almost has a gang member involved in it. It used to be an inner city problem. Now it lives in the heartland of America. It lives in New Jersey. It lives in of course, in Texas, and lives in almost on every area that America is exposed to. There's a gang member waiting to recruit. Yet that was me when I was a little boy. They knew what they were doing. They knew that an absent father, they knew that an absent mother
Mhm.
working all the time, they knew that I was a perfect candidate for them.
Oh my goodness, Mondo. Well, first thing I want to say is I'm very sorry what happened to you in your childhood.
Thank you.
You didn't deserve that at all. And I'm so glad your story didn't end there, and it didn't end in the gang's
Yeah.
life either. And there is so much. I mean, just to see the miracle of who you are now and expressing all the pain that you've been through, people have got to recognize the miracle that is here. And do you think that we have gang members crossing the border?
Oh, 100%. 100%. We're watching the news every day. There's gang members from Venezuela crossing in. There's gang members from El Salvador crossing in. There's gang members from Honduras, Nicaragua, Guatemala, Mexico. Of course, they're coming in by the loads. And I think there's a reassurance to understand that when you know they're coming in and they're not being stopped, it should bring a warning sign to every single one of us, because America doesn't understand that by allowing gang members to come in, they settled in, and they have already been settled in for a long time. Now there's an activation mode because of social media. Social media has changed the environment and the landscape on how recruitment takes place. And it changes it because you can't pinpoint it to what you used to be able to do. Now they're using technology in order to do that.
Mm, wow, wow. And your book also highlights some things that people can watch for and understand. You really gave me an education about gang life that I could have used years ago. years ago in my family to what to look for. So I appreciate that you do that. So maybe just take a few things, top few things that people just educate them what to
Yeah.
look for, where they will know they are in the presence of someone who has either been in a gang or is currently in a
Yeah.
gang.
One of the things that is first and foremost, you watch for graffitis on the wall. Graffiti meaning spray paints of names of gangs, names of individuals of the gang. The second you're noticing the lowrider scene, right? The lowrider scene is the car club scenes. Not saying that the car clubs are gang related, but in our culture, we use it as a gang relating tool in order to create an environment of letting people know that we're here. The second thing is the way people dress, the way they talk, the way they carry themselves. They always work in groups. They usually highlight the migrant communities more, but now they're even migrating into the African American community. They're migrating into the Caucasian communities because they see an opportunity that wherever migrants are located, they're going to be the first targets. They're going to be used as mules in order to navigate, how to move the drugs in that community. So there's certain things to watch for, right? Because language means everything. The way the language is being spoken. I'm not talking about Spanish. I'm talking about there's a language in the culture that we use in order to understand how the environment has changed. And with that being said, technology has changed the way the environment develops, right? And when you understand social media has literally changed the landscape of how a lot of the gang members are moving today, how the distribution of drugs are taking place. And I can tell you that it used to be an inner city problem. Now it's an every home problem. Every home in America is dealing with the idea that their kids can be using drugs. Listen, we have an epidemic of gang membership exploding once again. We have an epidemic of drug culture moving in once again. Wherever you see a drug influx of drugs, you better believe that gangs are behind it.
Wow. Wow. Well, I'm so glad the Lord got you out of that life, Mondo. I
Yes.
know you've got lots of lessons and a lot of wisdom to share with people based on what you have been through. But I do want to highlight another great woman of faith in your story, your sister Laura.
Yes.
And we don't have but a couple of minutes probably for this, but we'll pick it up in our next episode. But how did her faithful prayers, actions, and three thought provoking questions
Yeah.
begin to offer you hope for your future?
Yeah, my sister and I lived in the same home, yet we lived two separate lives. But yet she felt like she needed to pray for me and fast for me. And when she started doing that, God began to give her a word to deliver to me. I wanted nothing to do with God. I want nothing to do with religion. I didn't want any. Listen, I was protecting my what do you call it? My reputation. I was protecting the respect I was earning. Yet my sister walks in and she says three of the most powerful things that I heard at that time that began to change me was, what if God is real? What if prayer works? And what if you have a different destiny? Those three questions began to torment me because, Miss Theresa, you have to understand, every single day the community reminded me, the gang culture reminded me, don't make plans past 18 years old because you're not going to live past 18 years old. So don't think about making any plans to be a father. Don't think about making any plans. Either you're going to either end up in prison the rest of your life, you're going to end up in the hospital, or you're going to be dead. The title of my book is My Crazy Life, Mi Vida Loca. It's the three dots that represents the three tattoos, the three dots of the tattoo that I have. And I talk about and explain what that means in the gang culture, right? So tattoos that are representing the gang culture is another sign that there's an environment of gang culture in your community. Now, everybody has tattoos today, but there's certain tattoos that you have to watch for that will tell you there's a gang culture in the community. But those three questions began to torment me because on one side, society was telling me lock them up and throw the key away. On the other side, my homeboys, my friends were reminding me, don't make plans past 18 years old because you're not going to live that long. Listen, when you have to live under that pressure constantly, you have to live life understanding that your tomorrow is not promised. As a matter of fact, I hope I make it through the day. That was my prayer. I was hoping that I can make it through the day. But yet here inside of me, I was dealing with depression. I was dealing with anxiety. And a lot of gang members, believe it or not, they look tough and they have to remain tough. But yet inside of them, there's a little boy that is scared. There's a little girl that has been abused. There's a little boy that has been abused. A lot of the gang members have been sexually abused and have been brutally abused. And in order to protect that pain, they have to live on that survival mode. And that survival mode is intimidation. And as long as I can keep you away from me, I cannot let you inside of my painful soul. Listen, we have to protect us so desperately that they're willing to kill anybody from finding out who they are. That's a scary place to be. So when my sister walked in, she risked her whole life knowing that she could be rejected, knowing she can get killed, knowing that maybe she wouldn't come out alive. But yet, God had a promise.
Amen. Amen. Praise God. Oh my goodness. Well, we have about a minute, Mondo. So would you please, to start with, your journey's been amazing. It's just been amazing. And you've had so many miracles to date that declares that truly God's hand is directing your life. Yeah. But in just one more minute, would you please speak to those in our audience who are in similar situations that you faced? And offer them hope of a better future and lead them in prayer.
Listen, the first thing I want to tell you is don't give up on God. Don't give up on yourself and don't give up on your dreams. God has a plan for your life. Don't give up on the person that you feel like they're the most impossible person to reach. No one is too far gone to be reached by God. My situation looked impossible, yet my sister kept the faith. If there's one thing I can tell you, stay consistent in your prayer time. Stay consistent in your fasting time. My sister being consistent in praying and fasting for me gave me the hope that I needed one day. Don't give up on hurting people. Don't walk away from broken people. You may be that definition of life and death if you are not afraid to step in and remind them, what if God is real for them? What if prayer does work for them? And what if they have a different destiny? Don't give up on that person that you're praying for. That person is going to change. And believe me, God has a way to get their attention. Don't give up on them.
Yes, amen. Thank you, Mondo. Well, we're going to leave our audience on a cliffhanger because Mondo does come out of the gang life, but you're going to have to catch episode 2. So you be watching for episode 2 where we can get the rest of this story. But remember, Mondo's story is so vast and there's so much into it. We're just touching the tip of the iceberg in this interview and the next interview. So in the meantime, we want you to be sure to get your copy of Mondo de Vega's book, My Crazy Life. Thanks for watching. God bless and keep you is our prayer.
Thanks for joining us. To find out more about Theresa and where the Time with Theresa Around the World TV and radio podcasts are streaming, visit TheresaWestbrook.com. For prayer, guests, and sponsorship opportunities, contact Theresa today. We look forward to hearing from you.